Hello and welcome to the post-session recording of our fourth instructional design lunch and learn. My name is Dr. James McKenna and I have the pleasure of being the coordinator of inclusive design. So helping me out on the original session was Thomas Amia, a distance learning resource specialist here in curriculum instruction, and he was also the host of Webcam Wizardry, which was our topic in week 2. Just so you know, if you haven't joined us before, we have 2 rules. The first of which is that we make sure we're muted unless it is our turn to talk, and we do have quite a few discussions. The second rule is the Vegas rule, which is what happens in Lunch and Learn stays in Lunch and Learn, and that's why we don't record them. I do these post-session recordings where I integrate some of the things that we talked about during the session, the questions that came up, and all the content while maintaining an atmosphere where people feel like they can ask questions, offer ideas that they're not quite sure of, and that much. So we need it safe so we don't tape them. So this session is how adults learn. So we're going to look at what adults want in training, what they tend to think about their role as learners, and how we might account for these in how we design and deliver professional learning. So imagine you're about to attend a workshop, either online or in person. You're the learner, not the facilitator. What are the things that you would really like to happen? What would you be hoping for in a good learning experience? And people offered things like engagement, something that was relative to what they were doing, opportunities to talk to other people, and lots of interaction between the groups and with the facilitator. They also wanted to know things like they want an agenda so they know what to expect, what's the relevant info, opportunities for collaboration. They also want to know that it's got a solid base in research and data and that the content matches the description. What would we hope to avoid? They said they wanted to avoid sit and gets and people just reading slides to them, presenters who don't seem prepared, and a lack of practical application to their work. So after that discussion, we moved on to this discussion about this word. So pedagogy, we're all used to this term, but do we really know what it means? So pedagogy comes from the Greek roots paid, which means child, and agogos, which means to lead. So pedagogy is a leading of children. Now, we're not kids, even though we may be learning, the learning has to look different, or at least different from the teacher or trainer standard, sit there and I'll tell you what you need to know approach. We need another word. And 50 or so years ago, we got one from Dr. Malcolm Knowles. He coined the term andragogy, and his work on adult learning is what we explore in this session. There are other adult learning theories, and they're linked in the Padlet. There's a resource in the Padlet, and I'll send that link later on in this presentation. So, as I said, Malcolm Knowles is a leader in this field with work dating back to the 60s. And he has 6 principles, all related to the perceptions of the individual adult. Some are about themselves and some are about the learning. So first, let's look within the learners. Knowles tells us that we should assume that each person has a self-concept, an idea about who they are, their work, and their role and ability as a learner. They want to be active decision makers. They've been making decisions for a long time and they aren't likely to enjoy overly restrictive training structures. They also bring with them years of experience, both in work and also life in general, and they want that experience acknowledged and respected. Finally, they're largely internally motivated. You're not going to get them to really learn something using stickers and raffle tickets and stuff like that. Then we have the learner's perception of the learning. They want it to be important, they want it relevant to their work or their professional goals, and they want it to be practical. So this all boils down to 2 points of emphasis in your design. First, you got to make it learner-centered. The whole design is about getting them what they need to do what they want to do and do it in a way that reduces needless friction. The second is to make it performance-based. If I'm entering a learning event, I'm here to learn how to do something I can't already do, or do something I already do in a better, faster, or cheaper, new way. I want to know that we're going to do something, and that something's going to challenge me and help me grow. If it's purely informational, the old sit and get, I'm not likely to learn much, but I am likely to get distracted and maybe even annoyed. So let's look at some of the essential elements for making things learner-centered and performance-based. So first, we need to prep the learners before the learning begins. And I'm going to use a paradigm you might be familiar with, and that's Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. So we start with why. This is where you have your first opportunity to communicate the importance and the relevance of the learning, why it should matter to them. What is the general problem your audience wants to solve that brought them to you? Connect the learning directly to that. Next, we explain how the learning is going to work. It's going to be highly collaborative, flexible, allow people to make connections to their own practice so they put the learning into action. Finally, what? These are the concrete learning objectives, the timeline, the necessary materials. This is also where you lay out the expectations for the learners and how they need to meet them in order to get the most out of it. If you're doing a blended approach, outline how they'll need to engage in the asynchronous content in order to be able to make the most of the sync time. Learning is going to be something they actively do rather than have done to them. In other words, you're going to treat them like adults. So you're giving them flexibility, but they need to meet the expectations. If they don't, they miss the chance to solve their problem, and they let their classmates down because they can't contribute to the group learning. So when do you do this? How and might you communicate this? So when we had that conversation, our discussion centered around letting the learners know this before the learning event or before they are expected to begin learning. So one example was having a kickoff event so you can lay out all of those important points and allow the audience to ask questions to make sure they're clear on the importance, the relevance to the work, and the expectations of them. The next step is establishing the climate of the learning. So I asked participants to look at the slide and tell me what they noticed. We talked about the layout, people sitting in groups, creature comforts, beverages, nice chairs, the fact that people were facing each other and not the front and some speaker. The setting is professional, it's clean, it might benefit from some more uplifting color combos, but it works. The artifacts on the table suggest they have stuff to do, not just stacks of handouts or notes. Also, something we inferred from the facial expressions and the body language is that it's a psychologically safe place. People need to feel comfortable asking questions, offering ideas, making mistakes, and presenting work that's still very much a draft instead of a polished product. And then we talked about how we might achieve some of these things in an online environment. We talked about breakout rooms, tools like Padlet and others to foster discussions, and how, for example, we don't record the actual lunch and learn sessions to make it safe for participants. One idea I failed to mention is that you can send some guidance ahead to your learners. Tell them how they can take breaks, that they should feel free to sit in a comfortable, quiet area if possible, and have drinks and snacks available so they're taking good care of themselves. Finally, there's one tried and true way to make sure things are learner-centered and challenging. Work on real problems. Either allow them to bring in a problem they have that aligns with the learning, or give all the groups a single realistic scenario that they can all tackle, and then let them share their work and give and receive feedback and gather ideas from other teams. So at this point, I offered folks an activity where they had this Google Doc, and here's a snapshot of it. And on the left side, there were, you see two of them here, but there were all 6 of Malcolm Knowles' principles and assumptions of adult learners. And then the participants came up with ideas of how they could do things, like how they could make things important, make sure they stressed WIIFM, what's in it for me. We call it everybody's favorite radio station. Identify the current issues, things like that. And these +1s you see at the end of some of these is where, after the first round of people offering ideas, I had them go back and look at everybody's ideas and things that they agreed with, thought were great ideas, that they would put a +1 next to them. So the finished document is in your Padlet. Speaking of the Padlet, we have the Instructional Design Resources Padlet, and the link for that is this, and that's where we house the recordings, the resources, etc. Here's our feedback form, and even if you're just watching the video, some feedback is always fantastic. It's a gift. We had closing discussions. Most of it was talking about challenges working with adults, but then we talked about, recruiting ideas for future sessions. And with that, that's the end of this post-session recording. Again, I'm Dr. James McKenna, and I hope you will join us for a future Lunch and Learn.